Welcome back to Book in a Blink, the podcast where we explore the books. Today, we're traveling into the fascinating and something unnerving ways technology is shaping our lives, our world, and most importantly, our minds. I'm your host Mona, and today we're diving deep, or perhaps we should say, we're examining why diving deep feels harder than ever. Our subject is the widely discussed and occasionally controversial book by Nicholas Carr, The Shallows: What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. Now, before we plunge into the details, let's set the stage. Carr's book, first published in 2010, grew out a provocative essay he wrote for The Atlantic titled, "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" He didn't necessarily expect the kind of controversy that article stirred up, seeing it initially as a personal essay about his own changing experience with thinking and the internet. But it struck a nerve, because many people, like Carr, were starting to feel that something fundamental was shifting in their cognitive lives. The central question Carr grapples with, and one that remains incredibly relevant today, is: are we, while enjoying the pleasure and benefits of the internet, using our ability to read deeply and think deeply? It's a question that resonates with many of us. Just think about your own habits. How often do you sit down with a long article or book before feeling that almost irresistible urge to check your phone, glance at an email, or just to open another tab? Carr noticed this change in himself, particularly when trying to read books, something that used to come naturally. After just a couple of paragraphs, his mind would crave getting up, checking emails, clicking links, behaving just like it did when he was online. He began to suspect that his increasing use of the web was connected to this inability to concentrate. This isn't just about a personal struggle with focus. Carr argues that the internet is fundamentally altering our brains, and he looks through the lens of neuroscience to explain how. So, how exactly might the internet be changing our brains? This is where the science comes in, and Carr draws heavily on the concept of neuroplasticity. For a long time, scientists believed that the adult brain was largely fixed in its structure by our early 20s. This idea was that our neural pathways were set during our childhood, and after that, you were essentially stuck with the brain you developed. But as Carr explains, discoveries made over the past couple of decades have shown that even as adults, our brains are remarkably malleable and plastic. They are constantly adapting at the organic level to what we use our minds for, to our environment, and so forth. The brain isn't a rigid mechanical contraption like an old steam engine, where each part has a specific, unchanging purpose. Instead, its cellular components are flexible and change with experience, circumstance, and need. Studies demonstrate this adaptability in profound ways. For example, research has shown that if a person becomes blind, the visual cortex area of the brain doesn't just go unused. It can be quickly taken over by surtex for audio processing. If that person learns Braille, the visual cortex can even be redeployed to process touch information similarly. The brains of people who go deaf can strengthen their other senses. The plasticity extends beyond responding to injury. Our everyday actions and experience shape our brain. Experiments with violinists, for instance, showed that the brain areas processing sensation from the left hand, used for fingering strings, were significantly larger than in non-musicians, even for those who started playing as adults. Even just imagining playing piano notes for a period resulted in the same brain changes as actually practicing, suggesting our thoughts themselves can exert a physical influence on our brains. We become neurologically what we think. So, what does this mean for our internet use? Carr theorizes that as we train our brains to take in information very quickly in a very interrupted and distracted way, little bits coming at us all the time as we experience online, this strengthens the parts of our brain that are good at multitasking and quickly shifting focus. On the flip side, we are not exercising the parts of our brain involved in deep concentration, deep attentiveness, contemplation, and reflection. According to the principle of neuroplasticity, what we use gets stronger at the cellular level, and what we don't use weakens. This leads to a key argument. The way we use the internet, characterized by rapid information cycling and multitasking, is literally rewiring our brains. We are becoming very good at scanning and jumping between different streams of information, but potentially losing the ability to sustain focus on a single complex idea for extended periods. As Carr notes, the vital path in our brain becomes the path of least resistance. The more we travel down the path of distracted thinking, the harder it becomes to turn back. The internet, unlike older forms of media like books or even television, is designed for a specific kind of information flow and interaction. Carr describes it as fundamentally a hypermedia system with links that let us navigate quickly, a multimedia system that brings together text, video, audio, and images, and a messaging system that enables near instantaneous communication and, crucially, interruption. It also actively promotes multitasking. Think about a typical online experience. You might be reading an article, but there are hyperlinks tempting you to click away. Advertisements flash or move on a screen. Notifications pop up from email, social media, or other apps. Your phone buzzes with a text message. All of this constitutes an ecosystem of interruption technologies. Even just the presence of hyperlinks, even if you don't click them, can overload your working memory because your brain has to evaluate whether to click or not. Studies have shown that reading comprehension decreases as the number of links in the text increases, regardless of whether they are clicked. Multimedia presentations can also tend to decrease comprehension compared to focusing on information in a single format. This constant bombardment of stimuli makes it difficult to concentrate deeply. Carr explains this using psychological research on memory. We have working memory, which is the tiny capacity of our conscious mind holding about 2 to 4 elements at any given time. Then there's long-term memory, which is vast and where true knowledge is built through making connections and associations. The key to deep thinking and the formation of knowledge is transferring information from working memory to long-term memory through a process called memory consolidation. This process only happens when we are attentive and concentrate on new information for some period of time. The internet's constant interruption disturbs this consolidation process. Information comes in and out of our conscious mind too quickly for it to stick and form rich connections in long-term memory. We're overloaded with information, and to take in the next notification or tweet, something else must be cleared out of working memory. This overloading of working memory is a major source of cognitive overload, hindering deep learning and thinking. The internet, in this sense, is presented not just as a medium, but as a technology of forgetfulness. This phenomenon is supported by studies, A notable one from the standpoint compared heavy multitaskers, people who spend a lot of time online and multitasking, with light multitaskers. The heavy multitaskers performed worse on all 6 cognitive tests, including test of multitasking skill itself. They struggled more to distinguish important information from trivia, suggesting that constant jumping between information bits makes us less discerning about the value of information and more attracted to whatever is new. Another review of studies concluded that while growing internet use improves visual spatial skills, like quickly shifting focus on a screen, it weakens capacities for deep processing, mindful knowledge acquisition, critical thinking, imagining, and reflection. My personal take on this, having immersed myself in these sources, is that it's not that we lost the capacity for deep thought entirely, but rather the neural pathway supporting it gets less exercise. It's like letting a muscle atrophy. The internet trains us to use the scanning muscle constantly, while the deep focus muscle gets weaker. The ease of finding information online also contributes. As some sources point out, when you know you can just look something up on Google in a second, the incentive to commit information to personal memory or to think deeply about a topic diminishes. This reliance on external digital storage is something called the outsorted brain. While access to a vast library is amazing, the source suggests it may paradoxically lead to keeping rather little deep knowledge in our own heads. The internet didn't emerge from a vacuum. Carr places its influence within a long history of intellectual technologies that have shaped how we think. He examines tools like maps, the mechanical clock, the alphabet, and the printing press, showing how each in its time promoted new ways of perceiving and interacting with the world, often extending previously elite ways of thinking to broader population. Consider the alphabet and writing. Early writing, like that in ancient Greece, was closely tied to the oral tradition. Texts were often read aloud, and there were no space between words, making reading a difficult process akin to solving a riddle. The introduction of word spaces around 1,000 years ago was a technological development just as significant as the printing press. It made reading easier and led to the rise of silent reading, which became a personal and solitary pursuit. This freed the mind to go deeper into the text, fostering a kind of thinking built around deep attention to one thing. This was perhaps unexpectedly a very unnatural act for the human brain, whose basic instinct is to keep shifting attention to monitor the environment. The book, in its physical form, shielded the reader from distraction, facilitating this deep focus. The printing press then democratized the book, spreading this new way of thinking, solitary, concentrated attentives, to the masses. It led to an explosion in literary experimentation, more complex arguments, and the rise of the scientific method, which relies on careful observation and interpretation of written information. The literary mind, once confined to monasteries, became the general mind. Now, compare this to the internet. Carr argues the internet has almost the precisely opposite effect as an intellectual technology compared to the book. Instead of shielding us from distraction, it overwhelms us with it. This constant distraction, combined with pressure for speed and efficiency online, is reshaping not just how we access information, but how information is produced and consumed. Media companies are chopping up content into smaller bits, snippets of videos, parts of articles, individual songs to fit the shorter attention spans of online consumers. They're even redesigning traditional print products like magazine and newspaper to mimic the look and feel of a website, with shorter articles, summaries, and more graphics. This unbundling of content provides more choices but reinforces the habit of consuming information in small, disconnected chunks. Even books are becoming enhanced with the links, videos, and social features in their digital forms, potentially breaking the focused, solitary reading experience. The change in how we read and write inevitably influences languages itself. Just as silent reading encouraged personal, adventurous writing, the communal, rapid-fire nature of online communication may encourage writing that is bland but immediately accessible, focused on recording chatter rather than fostering deep intellectual or emotional engagement. A core theme in Carr's analysis, particularly concerning Google, is the emphasis on efficiency. Google, sometimes referred to as the Internet's high church, is founded on the science of measurement, striving to systemize everything and operating with a Taylorist ethic that prioritizes speed, efficiency, and measurable results above all else, including subjective human judgment. Their goal is to get users in and out really quickly. Google's business model is tied directly to this. The more quickly users jump between information bits and pages, the more data Google collects and the more opportunities they have to show targeted advertisement. As one source puts it, interruption is Google's business. This philosophy extends to how Google views knowledge itself. The Google Book Search project, while providing unprecedented searchability within millions of books, treats the book not as a self-contained literary work, but as another pile of data to be mined. Tools that let you slice and dice text, clip passages, or see word clouds are presented as enhancements, but they encourage a kind of reading that is about extracting relevant content bits rather than slow, deep excavation of meaning. Carr argues that this undermines the efficiency the physical book brought to reading, the efficiency of freeing our attention from decoding to focus on meaning. Google's founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, have even spoken of viewing the brain as a computer, suggesting human intelligence can be reduced to data processing productivity. This view, Carr argues, is a pinched conception of a human mind. It ignores the nuanced, tangible hierarchy of the brain and mind, where changes in one affect the other in complex ways not easily replaceable by algorithms. Now, connecting this to our daily lives, we see this emphasis on speed and efficiency everywhere online. Social media platforms, news sites, even educational tools often present information in formats that encourage quick scanning rather than deep engagement. We are rewarded with dopamine hits for finding new information quickly, reinforcing the habit of seeking novelty over depth. This creates a cycle. The platforms are designed for quick consumption, and our brains adapt to prefer that mode of consumption. Some argue that this is simply adaptation, that our human software will catch up to the machine technology. They suggest we'll evolve new cognitive skills, like the ability to juggle many conversations across different media simultaneously. But Carr and others question whether this adaptation is necessarily good. Adaptation is qualitatively neutral. What matters is what we become. If the price of becoming agile information schemers is the loss of our capacity for deep concentration, critical analysis, and reflective thought, is that a price we're willing to pay? Nicholas Carr's book, raises profound concerns about the potential long-term costs of our constant connectivity. But acknowledging the problem is only the first step. As one commenter points out, the internet is practically mandatory now, essential for work, school, and social life for many. Simply disconnecting isn't a realistic option for most people. This resonates deeply with me, and I imagine with many of you listening. We rely on the internet for everything, from our jobs to staying connected with loved ones. The thought of opting out completely feels, well, isolating. It's like the feeling described in one source, where people don't feel like they're freely chosen their online practices, but rather that they are habits history has enforced. So, what can we do if outright disconnection isn't usable? Carr, in writing his book, took steps to limit his online distractions, moving to a place with poor cell service and a slow internet connection, canceling social media accounts, and strictly cut email checking. He found that this allowed him to regain his ability to concentrate deeply, while his situation, self-employed solitary nature, might not be typical. His experience suggests that consciously creating space for different modes of thought is possible. The sources offer some practical suggestions for mitigating the internet impact. Be mindful of how you use tech. Recognize when you're just compulsively checking devices versus having a specific purpose. Set boundaries. Designate specific times for checking email or social media instead of being constantly interrupted. Keep devices on silent or out of sight during periods requiring focus. Prioritize deep reading. Make an effort to engage with long-form text, whether printed or digital, in dedicated, distraction-free blocks of time. The physical book, with its lack of embedded distraction, can be a powerful tool for this. Even if reading on a screen, try to replicate the focused environment of reading a printed book. Reflect on what you consume. Consciously choose content that encourages deep engagement rather than just quick consumption. Value solitary compulsive thoughts. Recognize that intellectual depth, creativity, and even deeper emotions like empathy can require quiet, uninterrupted time for reflection and memory consolidation. Don't let the societal emphasis on speed and immediate information drown out the value of slower thinking. One source mentions a study where overly helpful software actually made users less effective problem solvers in the long run because they weren't forced to think as hard. This suggests that intentionally seeking out tasks or modes of learning that requires more effort and deeper processing rather than relying on technology to do all the mental heavy lifting could be beneficial. Engaging in hobbies that demand high attentiveness is one example. This isn't about being anti-technology. It's about being mindful of its influence and making conscious choices to maintain balance in our cognitive lives. As Carr and the sources suggest, the brain will adapt to whatever we hand it. The crucial question is, what kind of adaptation do we want? Do we want to optimize solely for rapid information processing and multitasking, or do we want to perceive and nurture our capacity for sustained attention, deep thought, and meaningful connection? Perhaps the problem isn't the internet itself, but our unthinking embrace of it. We've been so quick to seize the benefit that we haven't paid enough attention to the costs. Recognizing these potential costs, understanding how the internet is designed to capture and scatter our attention, empowers us to make different choices. Ultimately, the future of our intellectual lives may depend on individual choices. While societal norms and technological design push us toward the shallow, the ability to resist, to cultivate moments of deep focus, and to value the richness that comes from sustained attention remains for now within our grasp. It requires effort, going against the grain of the constant stream, but it is an effort worth making to ensure we don't lose essential human elements of our brains. That's all the time we have for this episode of Book in a Blink. Exploring the shallows and the research it draws upon certainly gives us a lot to think about. Deeply, hopefully. Thank you for joining me. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And until then, be mindful of your media. Bye.